Good morning or afternoon, depending on where you are, and thanks for joining today's webinar, Features and Updates in the 2016 Intacct Spring Release. I'm Megan Turco, and I'll be your moderator today. Before we jump in, I'm going to briefly go over how to use the webinar console. The orange arrow on the right side of your screen will let you toggle the control tray open or closed, and at the bottom of that control tray, you will see a chat window. Please feel free to submit your questions at any time throughout the webinar via the chat function. Also, on your GoToWebinar console, you should see an area for audio settings. If you're calling in through your telephone, please choose the Use Telephone option, and alternatively, if you're using your computer speakers, please select the Use Mic and Speakers option. And lastly, I do want to note that today's webinar is being recorded. We will send out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar within about 48 hours. So definitely keep an eye out for that email if you're interested in accessing the webinar after today or sharing it with a colleague who couldn't make it with us live. And with that, I would like to introduce today's presenters. First up, we have Manesh Patel, who is a manager on Armanino's Intacct team. Manesh is a certified Intacct implementation consultant with knowledge in various ERP systems, Concur, Basecamp, and Dropbox. He has experience with technology companies, including cloud startups such as Livebox. We also have Brad Mikula with us today. Brad's a senior consultant on our Intacct team. He is also a certified Intacct implementation consultant and CPA. He has experience working closely with manufacturing and nonprofit clients. It's great to have you both with us here today. And with that, I'm going to pass the presentation over to Manesh to get us started.
Thank you. Great. Thanks a lot, Megan. I appreciate it. Looking forward to kind of speaking towards this quarter's big release updates. So here's our agenda here. We've got kind of a good amount of time that we're going to spend on contract and revenue management. There's been various workflow updates, as well as some updates regarding project accounting. A big theme over the past few releases is project accounting, so we'll talk through some of those. Reporting and insights, we'll have Brad be reviewing that. There are some ease of use updates, so from what we've been talking about for the past few quarters, AP and AR specifically, some nice capabilities that have been a part of this release number 2. And then we'll kind of go through some other enhancements that might be important to you. So with that, we will start with contract and revenue management. So I know with a lot of our clients, we have at least spoken about contract and revenue management. We have not gone into that much detail based upon some of those conversations. However, this at least will give you kind of a 50,000 foot view of this module, all the different types of capabilities, and what to do with respect to some of the new changes that are happening with ASC 606 and IFRS 15. So to step back a little bit, there are some updates with respect to Intacct contract billing. So it's a new module that Intacct has released with various types of capabilities that reflect some of the new standards that are coming out with all the different guidelines. So as I just mentioned, ASC 606 and IFRS 15, there's an impact to the way that revenue is recognized, as well as an impact to the way expenses are amortized. So this is probably more specific to professional services and subscription-based companies. For example, if we're going in and changing a contract for add-ons or discounts, upgrades, renewals, we are now going to need to apply them to a single contract rather than adding new contracts and reallocating revenue across all those new contracts. So this module allows us to kind of consolidate everything into one single contract. In addition to that, something new, of course, is what we've all been used to is deferring revenue over the course of the contract. However, this guideline also presents the ability to defer expenses. So in the screenshot here, and I know it's a little hard to see because we're coming in and presenting these screenshots through some videos, but towards the bottom, as you can see, there's an area to actually go in and expense and amortize expense over the course of the contract as well. So to kind of further this transition into all these new RevRec rules, there is the ability within Intacct to provide dual reporting. So kind of to ease the transition, which will happen in the next few years, Intacct has come out with kind of side-by-side reporting, so you can see how the revenue is recognized within the old rules, as well as how the revenue is recognized within the new rules. So lots of different types of dual reporting. I'm sure we've all heard about the ability to have user-defined books, as well as even do transactions on a cash and accrual basis. Kind of similar concept here, but it applies to RevRec specifically. Part of this methodology also gives us the ability to forecast revenue with the new RevRec rules as well. And we'll talk about reporting and insights. So this screenshot here just kind of gives you a little perspective as to what the contract record is all about. As you see towards the middle, you've got various contract lines by item, specifying the specific start and end dates, as well as the expense amortization. So when Intacct came out with this contract module, what the original intent was to go in and take a subscription-based company and look at all the different types of components that are important to RevRec. So, of course, through order entry and revenue management, which many of our clients are utilizing, you can go in and recognize revenue over the course of the contract. We'll talk about MEA and what that is and how that applies here as well. Going along with revenue with these new rules, the ability to amortize expenses over the different periods, which we just talked through. Also some updates with regards to billing, so fixed fee billing as well as usage-based billing. So we'll talk through that as well in the next slide, as well as reporting updates. So big updates on the contract side, the ability to go into Intacct and run a P&L by contract is now a possibility. Contracts is a new dimension that Intacct has added as a part of this module. So, of course, we all know the power of dimensions if you're using them, or I should say, as you're using them, because I'm assuming you all are. So we'll talk about all the different types of reporting that are available with the contract. So this example just kind of goes through and gives you a little detailed look of a particular contract with that line item description. And then we'll go through the different types of billing that are available as well. So a subscription into contract management, or the contracts module, kind of entails three areas. You've got a contract billing component. So a hot topic for, I should say, many of our clients is how best to handle renewals in Intacct. And that has been a very challenging topic. Some of our clients have utilized renewal macros, but have noticed and have understood some of the different limitations with that. So some new updates with regards to creating these renewals. Part of the contract billing as well is the ability to handle kind of fixed fee arrangements a little bit more flexibly. So for example, if you do have fixed fee billing, you can schedule it out over a certain set of time. You can actually specify the start and end dates for the billing. It's no longer kind of a rigid recurring billing structure. Also, there is usage-based billing as well. So if you, for example, have to track usage by a certain line or a certain quantity, or if you've got some metered billing per contract that you need to actually go in and track on a more detailed level, this is something that is available within contract billing. Now, as you can see here, part of that update is the ability to create your own pricing strategies as well. So going back to my usage-based pricing example, if you've got a cell phone charging you by the gigabyte for data usage, you can go in and develop your own pricing based upon all those gigs. Same application here for the price by CPM. Specifically, if you are an advertising company, and let's just say you've got various page displays that you actually display to your client, so it's in parts per million, and you need the ability to track usage based upon those parts per million, this is a pricing strategy that you can include. Discount tiers as well is new, so going in and adding some tiers to your pricing and then applying discounts to those tiers, as well as some minimum flat fees. So this contract billing component kind of extends to those renewals that I was just kind of talking through. The key difference here between renewals and how they're currently handled in Intacct through order entry versus the contract management is that we are managing our renewals at the contract header. So it's got some advantages over order entry. You can auto-generate new contracts upon renewal. So by default, co-terming is handled properly so that every line item that gets added to the contract will always co-terminate with the rest of the lines. Since we're not doing those renewal macros at the individual line item level. So what's actually in the line item is more so checkboxes that say, hey, is this particular contract subject to a renewal or not? And this screenshot just kind of outlines how you can, at the header level, define the renewal, and it's a template with a certain set of periods, and then you can actually even see a renewal history as well. So big updates on renewals. Oops, I went a little quick there. So also a part of contract billing is the ability to follow a standard revenue recognition or follow a advanced revenue recognition. So those are separate areas within contract billing. And you're probably already used to standard RevRec if you're using the revenue management module in accordance with AR order entry. Same idea here. You can, for example, if you had a straight line proration of exact days for $12,000 and it followed a 1/1 to 12/31 schedule start and end date, you're going to go in and amortize that revenue over the course of the 12 months, so 12 periods. So same ideas here. However, you can also do usage-based RevRec, so that's pretty new. Multi-book accounting, so kind of what I had just mentioned about dual reporting. You can see, let's just say you're wanting to see some of your reports with your legacy RevRec rules, as well as a new book with your new RevRec rules. So that's you get that ability within this feature. Of course, we kind of talked through expense amortization. That's very new to this. So the ability to go in and expense, create your expenses for your contracts over the course of time. The revenue forecast object also gets exposed in the custom report wizard. So if we are all familiar with custom reports and how they work, lots of different updates with respect to how you can go in and present your data. So that's standard contract revenue recognition. There's also advanced RevRec. So if you've ever heard of the terms MEA or multiple element arrangement contracts, there's some new guidance with respect to handling that. When I say MEA, it's more so, let's just say we have some add-ons and we have some changes to a particular contract. Well, you have some new arrangements to account for. Part of this advanced RevRec is to kind of give you a little bit of an audit trail around executing those MEAs. So let's just say I needed to reallocate revenue because there's some changes to our contract. I can go in and actually process that reallocation, and then Intacct actually has an audit checklist that says, okay, this person has reallocated revenue, here's why, and there's a notes field that gets exposed as well. You can have an effective date that gets exposed for MEA execution. So really the key differences between advanced and standard is the ability to have and manage multiple element arrangements. So what has changed? So I mentioned a couple of slides before this that the contracts is a new dimension, and that's important because as a dimension, you get the power of reporting in the financial report writer. And of course, you're probably all used to account structured reports and then going in through the system and being able to expand by a dimension. This applies to both account structured and dimension structured reports. So kind of flipping things around and saying, hey, I need my customers in my rows, and I want to be able, or my contracts in a rows, and I want to be able to account or report off of my account groups in my columns. So some examples, because contract is now a dimension, is a P&L by contract. You can also track your unbilled, billed, and paid revenue, billing and revenue forecasting, mostly revenue forecasting through the custom report wizard, but lots of different choices that you get now. This example of a screenshot is what I was mentioning about the dual reporting that Intacct gives you. Of course, it's not an easy transition between when guidance gets updated. So as a part of this transition, as you can see, journal entry 1 is telling you, okay, this is how the revenue is recognized under the older guidance or the legacy guidance, and journal entry 2 is how revenue is recognized under the new guidance, both of which are available to be reported on. So extending a little bit further into the forecast reporting, specifically, you can go in and forecast your products, your revenue, your expenses related to those products, your billing, your cash receipts. As you can see, I've got my my products here in my rows area, and then I've got them assigned to the various contracts, and then I'm going in through my columns and just analyzing certain periods of time. So different abilities for reporting and insights, and this is all a part of the new RevRec guidance. Workflow updates. I'm going to pass the torch over to Brad for some workflow updates.
Great, thanks, Manesh. So for those of you paying bills via ACH, you now have the ability to automate ACH vendor payments. Intacct has partnered with American Express to automate vendor ACH payments and eliminate the need to manually upload those ACH files. So if you've enabled the ACH AMEX functionality, you'll see the AMEX ACH option when selecting the bills to pay. So again, once you enable that, you see the option here. The workflow is going to be the same, so you'll create your bill, and then when you go to pay that bill, again, you're going to see that option. Choose the ACH Amex, and it's going to process that payment. What you're going to be able to do is set either an automation to have it automatically post to your GL, or you can customize and manually have those transactions post. A couple of other call-outs: you do not need to change your bank. You don't have to have a relationship with American Express. You can pay from any bank to any bank. And then, as I mentioned, you can automate your payments to be sent as soon as they are approved in Intacct and automatically post to the GL, or you can come up with some custom workflow and manually send those ACH payments.
Great.
Reporting and insights.
I just had one thing to add there, Brad. Especially for the Amex, if you're already utilizing Amex's check delivery service, as Brad's mentioning, Intacct is further deepening that relationship to involve ACH. So part of that same configuration, it's just actually a few additional call outs there, when we're going in as your consultants are going in and helping you build that out. But definitely, continue to see this expand or deepen even further.
Great, thanks, Manesh. Reporting and insights. Data delivery service is a subscription-based application. DDS is a scalable, flexible, and automated way to retrieve massive amounts of information from Intacct. With this information, you can export it and send it to a data warehouse where you can use various business intelligence tools to produce the valuable reports that you guys are seeking. DDS is going to give you the ability to schedule data delivery, so you can include complete record sets or only have Intacct send records that have been changed since the last time you scheduled that report. Like I said, I'm sorry, pass that up. Like I said, it is a subscription-based application. You can either contact your Intacct representative or Armanino representative, or you can go to company and subscribe to the DDS. The file attributes, I'll show this on the next page, but you can send the files in a number of different formats, as well as automate the delivery destination, as well as the frequency, whether it's daily, weekly, or monthly. And then the objects, which I'll show you on the next slide, is the actual data that you're going to be exporting to your data warehouse. So you can see here, you're going to assign it a schedule name, and then the different attributes, so the type of file that you're going to be sending, the delivery options, so how often, where you're going to be sending this, so where is your data warehouse, as well as the frequency, so daily, monthly, quarterly, and then the objects. So we only have 2 objects listed on this screenshot, but imagine all of the objects in Intacct and all of the information that you can potentially extract and send to a data warehouse. So whether it was journal entries or customers or AP bills, AR invoices, whatever you want, we can now export all of that information to a data warehouse.
Great, thanks, Brad. Also, a part of that update, or just updates in general, is the ability to have warehouse as another dimension. So in addition to that contracts being specific to the contract module, warehouses are also specific to the inventory control subscription. So same idea here. Ideally, when you're going through and thinking about starting to subscribe into new modules, of course, we want to make sure that we are involved to give you all the different best practices, but here are just some light instructions on how to actually enable the warehouses if you have inventory control already. So as you go through and have warehouses, of course, same capabilities to do all the different types of reporting within the financial report writer. This is just a little snapshot of the entry screen. So we're all used to the various requirements for our various 8 dimensions that you get out of the box. But as you can see, we need to identify an ID, which is a unique identifier, a name, which can be exposed on a report, and then we can also tie it to a location. So not necessarily a location/entity relationship that's required in a multi-entity shared environment, but as you can see, warehouses, let's just say I had a data center in San Francisco and I needed the ability to tie it to my San Francisco office location. That's one thing you can do, as well as set parents and children, managers, and various ship-to contacts. So this is just kind of an entry point into the screens. Really, the power here is the ability to use this in the financial report writer. So this next slide here just kind of outlines exactly what I just mentioned. You can, this is an example or snapshot of a sample financial report. So all we're doing here is taking these various warehouses, Austin, Houston, Dallas, and getting our inventory balances. And then the left-hand side, all that is just account groups. So in this case specifically, we are tracking our inventory. So we want to know what's available, what's in work in process, what's in our returns and repairs. But you're just exposing an account group and then expanding by the dimension called warehouse. So new ways of reporting. Also, as a part of just updates in general, not necessarily just related to warehouses, you have the ability of getting those column headings to display in the PDF. So previously, you have probably previewed your report in HTML, and you've noticed that each of the columns can have headers. And especially if you're going in and filtering something, I want to be able to see those headers. If you export that report out, it actually used to wipe out those headers. So just a minor update here. Now, when column headings are placed, you can just export it out in PDF, and it will then retain those titles for you. Project accounting. So we've been talking about this for the past few quarters, and there are some updates with respect to projects for each of the releases. This time, it's Intacct has said that it's kind of putting a face to project accounting. So the ability to actually do more visual reporting within the projects module. Part of this update is Gantt Charts. So the ability to have both summary and detailed Gantt charts to kind of give you some visibility around a project. And if we're not familiar with the Gantt chart, all it does is track a project and all the different progress areas around that project. And in a lot of areas, even if you get detailed, you can do resource tracking as well. So in this example, I've got a project, I've got a task for design OPS module, and then I've got these 3 resources that I've assigned to this particular project task combo. So nice to be able to see that. There is the ability to split the screen as well and kind of view the data in a few ways. And I'll show you some more example screenshots in the next few slides, but this is a nice visual that you get for each of your projects. So going into those examples of the types of Gantt charts that are available, there's a summary Gantt chart. So it's exactly as it sounds. It's going to look at the projects, and if you're using task resourcing, you can look at the projects only assigned to a certain project manager user. And usually the summary Gantt chart, it gets exposed in just like the individual project records, but also as a module report, you can actually run a summary Gantt chart for any project that you actually filter off of. The detailed one, you haven't seen that yet, but I'm going to show you a snapshot in the next slide. This is the ability to actually drill into the duration and the hours and actually look at all the tasks and who's assigned to those tasks. What's really cool about this that's different from some of the other reports, the drill down capabilities allow you to actually edit the tasks and resources on the fly. So nice to be able to kind of do that instead of duplicate your tab and go into another tab and actually edit those tasks. You can actually do it on the fly. So here's an example. As you can see here, this is a detailed version of a Gantt chart. So we've got some tasks that are, all we have is tasks that are in progress status. And then we've got some start and end dates because that's what we're tracking for tasks. And then it exposes the various areas that you fill out in the tasks record. So of course, if you're used to projects and tasks, there's so many different fields within those records. It's nice to be able to kind of see it a little bit more graphically instead of you just designing your own reports through the custom report wizard. So various drill down capabilities. You also can actually go in and filter through. And if we had scrolled to the right a little bit of this, it would actually show us that actual summary version as well. Also, another update to projects is some billing insight. So, of course, if you're already utilizing the projects module, lots of different ways to utilize it, but one of the key reasons why our clients have the projects module is this billing engine. And the billing engine will allow you to generate invoices off of your time materials projects, so any timesheets that have been submitted, and expenses. Let's just say an AP bill for some server that I bought that I need to mark up and bill back to a client. Travel, if I need to go in and book some airfare and then go in and generate an invoice to that customer, but consolidate that travel with the expense, with the time. Those are the various reasons for using generate invoices. The only area that has been updated is now you can actually see the actual billings. So instead of running a separate report and trying to run that report and then look at this screen or look at that pre-bill report, you can actually see these 2 fields that get exposed: the bill to date, so what has actually been billed to that particular date, and then your timesheets billed to date as well. So very nice to be able to see this so you don't have to run two separate reports or one separate report and then look at this at the same time. All right, so we'll go into ease of use updates next, and Brad's up.
All right, thanks, Manesh. So voiding and reversing AP and AR transactions. Prior to this release, as you can see on the screenshot, the transaction on the date was populated to today's date. So this caused a lot of issues for clients, and they've made functionality changes to this. To make sure your voided and reverse transactions are posted when you want them posted, Intacct has set the date for the reversing entry to blank, where now you have to specify the reversal date. And then they've also given you helpful information regarding best practices for this functionality. AP and AR importing. So to make AP and AR importing more intuitive, Intacct reorganized the option fields. So you can see that the general ledger is the first option. You will have the ability to post as historical or non-posting bills and invoices, but you can see it's now going to default to general ledger. But like I said, you do have the ability to import historical transactions. Filtering enhancements for AR statements. So you now have the ability to refine your AR statements and print or email the correct information to your customers. So including, or you can include inactive customers, zero balance customers. You can exclude reverse transactions, corresponding reversals, payments made to invoices, and adjustments applied to invoices. One call out, we still do not have the ability to actually customize the AR statement like we have the ability to customize invoices. I was hoping that, I know a lot of my clients were looking for the ability to customize their own AR statement, but unfortunately that was not in this latest release. Reconciling restricted accounts. So I think the best way to point out this new functionality is just to use a use case. So we have a multi-entity company that has users that are restricted to specific entities, but then they also have bank accounts that are restricted to specific entities. So prior to this release, there are times where users cannot reconcile those banks because they are restricted. So Intacct has created a solution for this. As you can see in the screenshots, the two requirements are that a user must be restricted to more than one entity to access the top level where they're going to do the bank reconciliations. And then number two, the user must have the same restrictions as the bank. So you can see here, the user information, they are restricted to 4 different entities. And in this specific example, the checking account is unrestricted, so they have the same restrictions. So this user would be able to reconcile banks at the top level.
Yeah, and Brad, just to kind of step in here as well, this is a huge update because in our current and even past implementations, we have previously told you that the best practices when setting up the checking accounts, especially if you have, and I have a use case right now where a client has multiple entities. They've got an entity in Australia, they've got an entity in the UK, and checking accounts, prior to this, were set up inside the entity. Well, if they were set up at the top, then those users who have access to that particular entity, like Australia or UK, would only be able to reconcile at the top. So this nice functionality just kind of creates that relationship. And I think this is going to apply to many clients, especially ones that have already implemented for, and let's just say that their users are not restricted, but they now need to be restricted so that one of those users doesn't accidentally book a transaction to an entity that they don't belong in. This is kind of a key area to do that. And Brad shared those screenshots here But pretty easy to do. As you can see, you can turn on checking account restrictions if you haven't done so already. So if you don't have it restrictions and you don't see this restrictions tab in the checking account, you can go into subscriptions, click on multi-entity console, and then just click the configure button. And then there is a little checkbox that says, hey, do you want to go in and restrict your checking accounts? Would you like to go in and restrict your vendors or your customers? So various checkboxes there. You would just select the checking accounts one, and then that would expose it in the checking account record for this first screenshot up top. And then you're already used to this user entities area. So when you're doing any kind of user maintenance, you can see that you can go in and say, hey, this user should only be seeing the US entity as well as some of the other entities, but not all the entities. So big update here. Thanks, Brad.
Yeah, thanks, Manesh. All right, streamlining intercompany billing. So Intacct has enhanced billbacks for multi-currency and IGC companies. So again, I think the best way to explain this functionality is through a use case. So let's take an example where entity A has a base currency of US dollar and needs to invoice entity B, which has a base currency of the Canadian dollar. With this solution, entity B, the Canadian entity, no longer has to manually create the bill. When entity A creates the invoice, the corresponding bill will automatically generate in the Canadian entity. So this process, or the setup, is fairly involved, but if you go to the homepage of Intacct and click on the videos, there's about a 7-minute video that does a really good job of explaining the setup as well as the functionality that I just explained. Improved allocation precision. So you now have improved precision when creating allocations. So you can see in the screenshot, you now have up to 12 decimals when allocating by a percentage, whereas in the prior release, you only have the ability to use 8 decimals. And as you can see, you can still use the absolute dollar value as well for allocations. Other enhancements. So most of you are probably already familiar with this verification process and have already gone through this. But what this is going to be is a 2-step verification that Intacct is going to require your users to go through at least one time. So they'll log on to Intacct. You'll receive a code either via email, a text message, where you'll go through the process, verify the computer you're using, and then once you log in, your users will never have to go through that process again unless you are using a new browser. In that case, or a new computer, obviously. In those cases, you would go through the verification process again, verify those computers and the website, and then you would never have to do that again. You also, if you're looking for increased security, you can have your users go through that process every single time they log into Intacct.
Yeah, and here to add to Brad, we spoke about this in the first release about how 2-step verification is coming in, and Intacct is becoming more and more strict in terms of security because, I mean, on my iPhone, I can access Intacct on my iPad, on my tablets, laptops. I mean, Intacct is on the cloud, so going in and being able to enable 2-step is a key area where they just want you to be able to kind of better manage your security. And also, in addition to what Brad said, I have a client that needs to. They have various international entities, and they need instead of sending text messages to their longer phone numbers, they have a QR code that gets that they can actually go in and scan. And once they scan that and put in the verification code from the QR code, they can also log in. So a couple of ways to be able to kind of access this second step verification. The screenshot that Brad just shared here is just one that gets enabled if you've got admin privileges in your environment, and part of those admin privileges are to be able to manage the company and global company information. That security tab has this little checkbox that you can have. So Intacct is stepping into more more strict approaches when security is concerned.
All right, thanks, Manesh. The last enhancement to cover is the Intacct daily rate calculation. So the daily exchange rate provider, for those of you who have multi-currency, Oanda is the daily exchange rate provider. They've enhanced the rate provided, making it more precise. So with this new release, the Intacct daily rate exchange rate uses the first 4 non-zero digits after the decimal.
All right. Well, I know we kind of covered a lot of information, and we spent a good deal of time on contract and revenue management. But as I mentioned, that is definitely a 50,000-foot view, trying to kind of give you all the different updates that have happened. Also, we walk through the various workflow updates. As you've been seeing, the common trend is AP and AR, and just different areas where Intacct has become a little bit more flexible. Project accounting, I believe, will continue to be an area that Intacct is releasing new and improved updates for. Of course, reporting and insights. Last quarter, we talked about all the various ways to do graphs and get those graphs exposed in dashboards. But as you can see, Intacct is introducing new dimensions to the play. So that just makes them all available to be used in the financial report writer. And then I think ease of use updates are going to continue to be the trend here because, as you as our clients are submitting ideas in the Intacct knowledge base, honestly, all these ideas are what Intacct is listening to, and they just forecast it over, their updates over the course of, 6 to 9 months. So if you actually went in to review any of these release notes in the homepage of your Intacct environment, you'd be able to see a little area on the top left of each node, and it'll say a certain number of votes for an idea. So, the nice thing about that is, of course, Intacct's focus is around refining this GL system to meet all the different various needs for clients across a lot of different types of niches. So we just come in as we come in to kind of help you and guide you through that process. So I think ease of use is going to continue to be an area that will go through some improvements. And that's our conclusion, Megan.
Thanks, Manesh and Brad. It was great having you both here today to share your insights with us. We do have a handful of questions. For those of you listening in, feel free to submit additional questions now if you'd like. If we don't get through all of them, Manesh and Brad will be able to answer any questions that you have that we don't get to today offline. So with that, I will kick us off with a few questions here from our audience. One of them is, I'm currently using the projects module, but I don't see the summary and detailed Gantt charts in my environment. How can I get access to those?
That's a good question, Megan. I actually had this question recently, even before this webinar, from a client who is in professional services, in the construction niche, and they definitely like and use Gantt charts even before Intacct released this. So if you don't see it within, if you're hovering over, if you've got the projects module, for example, and you're clicking on the word projects to get to your list of projects, you'll see a little Gantt chart button actually for exposed in each of the records. If you don't see that, then it's likely something in your permissions that's missing. So you can actually go, if you're an administrator involved in user maintenance, go into that role for the projects, and once you click on the role, then go into the subscription and the permissions drill down, and there should be a little area, I think 2 lines that get exposed for Gantt charts. Just make sure you click those, save, refresh, and then if it's still not there, just log out, log back in, or just send me a quick message. But definitely something that is easy to run in terms of reporting. So you should see it on the projects record through that listing, as well as if you're hovering over the projects module and then being able to go in and review one of those modular reports.
Perfect. Thank you, Manesh.
Mm-hmm.
And Brad, I think you might have covered this one, but just in case we don't have, just in case our listeners here might need an update, do you need to have a direct relationship with Amex to use the Amex ACH payment service?
Yeah, great question. You do not need a relationship with AMEX to use the service. It's really just turning on the application. If you're currently using ACH functionality, you should already have the vendor's ACH information populated on the vendor record. So really it's just a matter of turning on the new functionality and you should be able to use it.
Exactly. And part of that is just Amex is just your engine to go in and send your payments out. So similar to check delivery service, if you're using that, all you're doing is going through your standard AP process. And then instead of actually printing all those checks, Amex goes in and prints those checks for you and then mails them out for you. So same idea here.
Great. Thank you both. And also, where would someone find the template to import AP bills? Also, can you import one-time vendors?
Yeah,
Brad, do you want to take that on or you want me to take that on?
Yeah, that's fine. You can go to, when you're logged into Intacct, you're going to go to Company, and then you would need to open Setup. So depending on your permissions, if you have the open Setup in the bottom right, you're going to click that, and then at the top, you will have the Company Setup checklist. If you click on that, it's going to break down each module and all of the templates that you can export and populate your information with. Included in the AP section would be that place to get the AP bills. And as far as importing one-time vendors, is there a flag on? I don't know, Manesh. Is there a flag?
Yeah.
No, there is a flag.
Yeah, there is a flag, and that's a separate template for vendors. And yes, you can import them and just mark that little flag as one time. And what that's going to do is, exactly as it sounds, become a one-time vendor. That update that Brad spoke about in this session, it's really helpful because if I'm going in and importing AP bills, the system used to always default to the historical ledger. Well, you're only going to default to the historical ledger when we implement for you, or you're cutting over into a new system from your old system. Historical ledger is non-posting, so technically, unless that's a use case for you, I wouldn't see you going in and importing anything to the historical ledger. So what's nice is Intacct made this update so that it at least clicks the default for you as general ledger, so you don't have to go in and just remember to do it.
Perfect. And when do you expect the feature to customize customer statements, for instance, customer template, customer logo, etc.? When do you expect that feature will be released?
That's a good question because even I think Brad, you mentioned a lot of your clients are asking about that. A lot of mine have asked for that for the past year or 2 years at least. Right now in the system, there's some customizability through Microsoft Word through a series of merge fields to handle your accounts receivable invoicing, as well as to handle your sales invoicing, and even going in and modifying and creating your own custom sales order. The statements, unfortunately, have not been an area that has, kind of given you a little bit more leeway to present your own version of a statement. I honestly think it's leading that direction. I can't give you an exact release date, unless I was maybe a product manager at Intacct, but I still probably couldn't be able to release that. However, I can tell you that it's a constant trend because one of the other key areas that our clients have asked us about is, and I just had a client ask us the other day, can you send invoice supporting documents like a sales order and a contract and all that stuff that I go in and attach? Can you send that in the, when actually going in through Intacct and sending your invoice? And yes, that's possible if you have utilized the email templates in Intacct and you've designed your own version of like an email template. There's a button actually in the email template that says, hey, include the attachment documentation. So I think areas like that, email templates were not around, until the past few years, where Intacct used to just submit invoices and it used to say, "Dear customer, here's your invoice," right? Well, you obviously want to say, "Dear, here's the name of the customer," right? So I think it's heading that direction, Gemma, but this feature that Brad just mentioned at least gives you filtering capabilities, which was was not present before. So gives you some hints in terms of being able to see it in the future, but not yet.
Thanks, Manesh. And also, can you give us an example of usage-based revenue recognition?
Yes. I think specific to contract management, I think I mentioned that you can do usage-based rev rec, and going back to that example, you can also do usage-based pricing. I gave the example for. So if you're an advertising company, and I've had actually a couple of advertising companies that have done this, but you're going in and displaying a bunch of impressions or page displays, and then they're in the millions, and you're going in and needing to bill your clients off of those page displays. Where the usage-based rev rec comes into play is, let's just say you have an amount for all those page displays, and that usage is proportionate to the number of units delivered. So let's just say you are utilizing the fulfillment in Intacct, and you have marked those number of units as delivered. What you'd be able to do with usage-based rev rec is take those number of units delivered and divide that by the total number of units expected. So if you've ever used percentage completion for rev rec, like let's just say you have the projects module, that's an area where you can actually utilize percentage complete on a particular project. Hey, I'm 50% complete. Let me recognize 50% of my revenue, but let me put my billing on a different engine. Same idea here, but this is specific to usage. So also specific to having the contracts module.
Thanks, Manesh. We do have a couple other questions, but they're a little bit more customized answers or might need a little bit more explanation. So I'm going to let Manesh and Brad answer those last ones offline. So we will let everyone out just a few minutes early today. Brad and Manesh, thank you so much for sharing your insights with us today. For our audience, thank you for joining us. Brad Manesh's contact information is up on the screen, but as I mentioned earlier, we will be sending out the slides as well as a link to the on-demand recording of the webinar. So no need to hurry up and copy those down if you don't already have their contact info. We will be sending that out shortly. As you exit today, there will be a quick survey, so definitely take a moment to let us know your thoughts on today's webinar. Anything that you loved or anything that you want to see in future webinars, we'd love to hear it. Thanks for joining.
Thank you.